Hey guys, I wanted to answer a question I got from a client, and I thought it might be interesting or helpful to everybody to hear it. And so I thought I'd do it on here. Hi, Lisa. Let me know if you can hear me. For those of you who don't know, I'm Meredith Hawley. Hey, Bree. I'm a lawyer and I'm a power dynamics facilitator in workplaces. One of my clients who owns a business is implementing a new system and we're hopeful that it's going to really help create more inclusion in her workplace. She asked me this question, and I know it's Memorial Day, and I kind of didn't want to talk about work on Memorial Day to you all, anticipating that you might not want to, but I'm going to anyway because I feel like it's a important concept, and I want to try to explain it thoroughly. I also have been seeing all these posts about Memorial Day, about how it actually was created by Black Americans, and we've kind of turned it into something that it is not. And so I want to do this in honor of Memorial Day. It's sort of been that white presence has taken over what originally was created by Black people, and we don't do a lot to honor them and what they've given us in this. And so that's going to be relevant to what I'm talking about overall. So happy Memorial Day. So the question is about creating a new system to promote inclusion. And I'm going to use the example of pay transparency in this situation, because I think moving towards pay transparency is a pretty tangible thing that we can look at. If you own a business, if you're in a business, pay transparency is a major indicator of whether people get paid fairly and equally based on gender, race, issues like that. So we know that overall, white women are paid about 80 cents on the dollar. For Black women, I think it's 69 cents or something like that. And for Hispanic women, it's something like 54 cents on the dollar. So both race and gender can be real issues when it comes to pay equity. And a major factor that they found is that women going into the workplace don't know what other people are making. And so we don't negotiate at as high a rate as men typically do. And this can it starts women out at lower pay rates, and that just increases as time goes on. There is a federal component, just so that you know the law. Your business is likely impacted by this, no matter what state you're in. When employees are talking about their salary, it's a unionizing activity, and so they could have protection just because it's a unionizing activity. But many states have been implementing. When I looked at it, I gave you the link, but it looked like about half of states so far have implemented pay transparency. And that means that if your employees are talking about their salaries, you can't retaliate against them for doing that. So a lot of employers have, for example, policies that say you can't talk about your salary, and that is actually probably not an enforceable policy. At worst, it's an illegal policy. So everybody should be taking a look at this anyway. And as you implement pay transparency, the problem is that you want the salaries to be fair. So you want to actually be working towards fairness and expecting your employees to talk about this, but you want to get ahead of the game. Because if your employees are talking about their salaries and it's not fully transparent, often what happens is there's just a lot of gossip and a lot of blown out of proportion conversation about what the unfairness is, because people don't know where it actually is. If you can have math attached to it and then allow people to come to you if they believe something is unfair, correct what you can, but then let people come to you if they think something is unfair, then you can get good information from them and you can actually make the corrections that you need to make things fair. You can consider what your employees are telling you about what's fair and what's not fair and what they're seeing in the salaries. So what we want to do often is we want to make everything fair ahead of time. We want to have sort of inclusive policies. We want to solve discrimination. We want to see all the problems and address them ahead of time so that then nobody can come to us and complain, and we know that we've done it perfectly and there's no problem. And so this is sort of what my client was asking me about. Like, I want to do this perfectly. I want it to be a good policy ahead of time. I want things to be fair. I'm doing all this work. And I asked her, what are you going to do while she's implementing her system that she's doing? What are you going to do about employee complaints? What's your response going to be? And she was like, well, since I'm doing everything right, I'm not going to need to have a process for that because I'm working so hard at this. And I can totally see where she's coming from, right? Like, most of us don't want to be discriminatory. So we're like, I can find where things are discriminatory, I can fix it, and then there will never be a complaint because I did the right thing, right? It is not how discrimination works, because our unconscious brains are what are discriminatory. This goes back to the myth that a lot of people believe, which is that discrimination happens in bad companies and it happens to weak people. And I will tell you, discrimination happens in good companies, and it can happen to anybody. And any one of us, because of our unconscious brains, can act in discriminatory ways. And then we want to have people show it to us. Like, the goal is to have people come to you and tell you where the discrimination is happening so that then you can address it. But you are not going to be the expert ahead of time about what employees are going to see. And so the other option that I see people do is I see people say either employees can just quit if they have a problem because I've already fixed it ahead of time, or I can conduct a massive investigation when an employee complains about something, and then we can discover whether I did it right or whether I'm an evil person. And both of those, if you're communicating them to an employee, sound like, please quit because you're addressing a problem. So it's discouraging, even if that's your attitude, even if you're not saying the words, if you have a problem, you can just quit, or do you want a formal investigation about that? If it is your attitude that you need to be perfect ahead of time about discrimination and that you can't receive any complaints, you're inviting your workplace to have high turnover and to have these insidious problems that you never find out about. So both the options of the formal investigation or the you can quit if you have a problem don't really work to actually get you to an inclusive place, because an inclusive place is a place where you are welcoming opposing views, considering them, and working together towards a solution, right? It's where you can see your own privilege and your own lack of privilege, depending on what side you are on, or on both sides, right? See where your privilege is, see where your privilege is not, see where your power is, see where you have some room to improve your amount of power, and then you can work together to find a common solution. So when we want to be perfect, especially related to discrimination, a lot of times what that ends up becoming is either paternalism or white saviorism, which is kind of like, they have kind of similar qualities to them. It's saying, I'm the parent, I'm the strong one, I'm the perfect one. I don't need input from all the children, all the little ones whose opinions are kind of invalidated, because I am the one who's taking care of everything. I'm the perfect one, I've done it perfect ahead of time. Paternalism, white saviorism. And one of the problems is it doesn't treat people with the disadvantaged characteristic that you're addressing or even people with just an opposite characteristic of than yours as equals. It doesn't treat them as adults and welcome their opinions, so it doesn't actually create inclusion. It just creates a barrier between you and the opposite person where they're not allowed to give you input to help you improve. But they're actually the key resource towards you improving. So anytime you are implementing a new system, policy, anything that you're wanting to do, you want input from the variety of different stakeholders that you have in your organization, right? You do want to get their input ahead of time so that you get their insight into what they see as a problem. So one of the ways that I've seen this talked about in terms of race is I saw this post that this man made that I thought was so insightful, and I just scrolled through it, and I don't even think I'm friends with him. I think it was like a repost to me. But what he said is he got into an elevator on in like just a business. He's like going to his bank or something. And this white woman said to him, "I know what it feels like to be Black because I grew up poor." And he could tell that she was trying to be nice and she was trying to be non-discriminatory and identify with him. But the reality is she doesn't know. She doesn't know what it is like to be a Black person growing up in America. I don't know that. I'm not supposed to know that. I am supposed to listen to people who do know about it and create a safe, open space for them to tell me. So one of the ways I was describing this and that I talk about it is if we're being paternalistic, if we're being a white savior, we are actually taking on responsibility that we don't have is one way to look at it. But we're also treating the other people as though they're not capable of having the responsibility, which they are, because they are our peers who are the experts at that experience. We're not supposed to be. So we're pretending that we have all this responsibility that we don't have, no matter whether we've researched racism all day long or not. Like, I could research racism for the rest of the week and I will not be a Black person in America. And so my job is to open the safe space to hear from them and to get input from them. So one of the ways that I like to think about this in terms of your business is most of us who have run a business have done like beta tests or pilot programs, right? So what I see from a lot of business owners, this is true of me too, when you're first starting a business, what you want to do is have the perfect business. You're like, I will spend the next 2 months creating my program, and it will be the most amazing program that anyone has ever seen. And then all of my clients will love it. And if it's a good program, I will succeed. I will be a good business owner. And I won't take feedback, right? Like, I don't need feedback because I worked on my program for 2 months. And most business coaches will say, don't do that. That's a terrible idea because you have to run a beta test and do it wrong in order to succeed, right? You need the input from actual clients who are participating in your program in order to do a good program. This is the same as implementing a diversity initiative and inclusion initiative, right? You need to set it out there. Know that you are not the expert yet because you're working on it, and then open up the safe space for the input that you need from the key people involved. In a business, in an employment situation, the key people involved are the employees that you're doing this for, right? It's not other business owners who are imagining what it might be like to be those employees. It is the employees. So a lot of times we think about getting employee complaints as like an indicator that something has gone horribly wrong. We also talk about this. I see these interesting things. There were statistics about West Point, I think it was, is getting 25% of female cadets are complaining about sexual assault. So they're identifying this as a problem. And it's actually a good sign because the statistics show that about 25% of women in those situations experience sexual assault. So they're actually getting the reports that are consistent with the experiences. In other words, their female cadets aren't hiding anymore. They're willing to talk about it. They're willing to bring up the solution and let West Point respond with a solution, right? It's the same. You want to think about it the same with employee complaints, right? They're experiencing it. And if you shut them off from telling you about it, you're shutting them off from offering you something super valuable for your company's improvement. The other way that I think about this in terms of how we respond to it and how we set that safe space is like if you have a roommate, I mean, and it works with the beta test too. So if you do a beta test in your business and your beta testees come to you and say, hey, I just want to let you know, I thought this part of your program was excellent, but here's where I got caught up and here's where it didn't work for me. And you say, well, then you can just leave. I guess I'm not your person. Then you're not hearing the complaints, right? You're not hearing the opportunity for your improvement of your beta test. You actually want people to identify what's working and what's not working in it. It's the same with any kind of diversity initiative. It is vulnerable, but it lets the people who actually are going through it give you the important information. It puts that responsibility on them, lets them solve it, thanks them for solving it, instead of you expecting to always have the answer all the time. So the other example that I was thinking about this is like if you have a roommate and you go to your roommate and you say, hey, will you do the dishes? And your roommate says, no, I won't. And if you don't like it, you can just move out. It's kind of an extreme response, right? But it's the same as I'm not going to fix what you're identifying when there's an employee complaint, and you can just leave if you don't like it. It's like weird on two levels because it's like, whoa, okay, you can just say no. You don't have to like encourage me to move out. Like you can just say it's my turn to do the dishes. It's like jumping to a huge conclusion, but it also is like not at all having a conversation, not having that inclusive dialogue where you're getting the information and having a back and forth and creating a solution based on both people's perspective that is sharing information. So, or like if your example is, if your typical response in your company is, we'll conduct an investigation, it's like if you went to your roommate and said, will you do the dishes? And they were like, I will conduct an investigation about all dishwashing in this household first. Like sometimes you can just say, oh, sure. Or I think it's your turn. Or I don't agree about this, but tell me where I'm wrong about it, right? Like it doesn't have to be such a wall around you from receiving the information that is supposed to help you create the environment that you're actually working towards. So so their feedback is crucial to you improving and actually implementing what you're going to, what you're like working towards. And then there's kind of a thing of like, yeah, just that thing of you're not supposed to know. So the thing I want you to ask yourself is, if you are implementing diversity and inclusive projects or changes in your business, I just want you to ask yourself, why? So is the reason that you're implementing these initiatives, is the reason that you want to have more diversity, have more inclusion, do you want that because you know how valuable it is to have two opposing ideas come together and create a creative solution? Like, do you see the value in listening to voices that are different than yours and using them to implement something creative and new? Is that the reason that you want to start these things? Or do you want to look like an inclusive person and you feel guilty and social pressure to do that? So if you really want to get the benefit of inclusion and get that fusion of ideas, of opposing people, then that is a motivating reason to listen to people who have opposing voices than yours and expect yourself to not get it right the first time, because you need them to show you how. If you just feel guilty and you want to look inclusive, then there are easier ways to do that, kind of. I mean, that's not truly wanting to be inclusive in your business and wanting to get that value out of what that means. I would just question how meaningful that is in your life and whether you want to just drop the issue altogether. So if you want to take a look at more about this, I made a cultural health pyramid that I'm pretty excited about, and I want to have a few people take it and see what they think. But the cultural health pyramid basically describes where you are. It lets you identify where you are on that journey towards fusing opposing ideas with your own and creating new solutions and getting that benefit out of inclusion. So if you're interested in that, just send me a private message or comment here and I'll email it over to you or drop it to you in a messenger. I'm interested to hear what you think about it. And any questions that you have about that, let me know. I know sometimes when I can see the solution to it, I can see the benefit of it. I need to have questions. I need to have you ask me in order to see where I'm not explaining something clearly. So I would love any questions that you have about this. And again, happy Memorial Day. Thank you to the soldiers and the former slaves who started this for us. And I will talk to you guys soon.